Hey everybody, so this video is the very start of the basic genetics topic. And the very first thing you need to know about for genetics is what's DNA and what are chromosomes. So we're continuing our story of the cell, which we learnt about in the last topic. So here's a typical animal cell, just a generic cell that doesn't have a specialized job. And remember that the nucleus is the control center of the cell. So our whole topic of genetics is focused around the nucleus mostly, because that's where the DNA is contained. So we're always picturing that we're in the nucleus for most of the concepts that we're talking about here. So what actually is DNA? Well, it's a molecule, and it stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So there are quite a few other types of nucleic acids that we'll learn about. DNA is probably the most important one though, because it contains all the information for how to control the cell. And all that information is in a code. So DNA it contains all the coded instructions for controlling the cell. So you can think of it like it's the instruction manual that's kept inside every cell. And you can see here's a diagram of the actual molecule of DNA itself. And you can see the individual atoms that make it up. And we'll learn about those specific molecules that make up DNA in later levels. So here's another look at DNA. You can really just think of DNA as long pieces of string, because you can see here the detailed structure of DNA, except DNA molecules are really, really, really long. So when you view them under a microscope, you're basically looking at long pieces of string. And what scientists have discovered is that actually we don't have just one molecule of DNA in every cell. Our DNA is chopped up into 46 different pieces. And each one of those single 46 molecules is called a chromosome. So chromosomes are individual strands of DNA. And you can see here, so here's a molecule of DNA. Just looks like a piece of string, but that individual molecule we would call a chromosome. Sometimes chromosomes look like this. They condense into this X shape, and that's at a certain stage of the cell cycle, which we'll learn about later on too. So if you ever see this X shape, that's just a chromosome that's been condensed. And condensed means it's wound together really tightly. And that's actually the easiest way we can view DNA under a microscope. It's usually too small to actually see when it's unraveled like that. Okay, so now we're going to look at the actual genetic code. So I mentioned that DNA contains a code. And the genetic code is basically a series of 4 letters which represent molecules on the DNA strand. So basically, it's a language. A language of 4 molecules, which are called bases. And just these 4 different molecules, depending on their particular arrangement, has enough information to control everything that a cell does, from growing to reproducing and to surviving. So you can see on the picture of the DNA strand here, we've got 4 different colors of bases, and the bases are on the inside of the DNA strand. So you can see we've got a red, a grey, a black and a green, and they represent the 4 bases. So this is like learning the new alphabet again. The first step of genetics is to know all the names of the bases. So thymine is T, adenine is A, then we've got G, which is guanine, and C, which is cytosine. So these 4 letters are the language that DNA and cells use to control everything they do.